Okay, just a quick run through with the agenda. So Kathy's going to do a welcome and a group question to lead us into today. I'm going to go through some housekeeping items. And Jason is going to talk about some highlights from a Nature-Based Solutions International Workforce report that he was digging into, and it has some interesting takeaways. We are so happy today that our workforce study contracting team can join us. So Estelano Advisors, Echo Northwest, and Kimamela. Actually, can a team tell me how to say correctly the Serena's consulting firm? Never actually said it out loud.
Yes, I believe it's Kimamela.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Kimamela Consulting, which will take up most of our time today together. And I'm really looking forward to that and kicking off formal work. And then we'll wrap up. Alrighty, Kathy, next slide.
Yes. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for making the commitment to be here today. We do have two new committee members, one of which is we're expecting to join us. As said, I'm not sure she's on yet. I just kind of did a quick search and didn't see her, but we have been trying to fill the environmental justice seat, and we added two members, Nikita, who is hopefully going to be able to join us today. She has been deeply involved in advocating for equitable land access for small scale and BIPOC farmers in cities where farmlands are limited and often inaccessible. She's also on the board of directors of the Oregon Agricultural Trust. And then the second new member who's not going to be able to join us today due to some conflicts is David, excuse me, excuse me, my allergies are not being very cooperative today. David Mill Drexler, and he has worked closely with rural and tribal communities. He has a PhD in forest ecosystems and from OSU, and has worked for a couple of decades on the interactions between vegetation and climate. So we're really pleased to have those two new members to help us on kind of our environmental justice and tribal perspectives and experience. I also just wanted to mention that two existing members, that one that can't join us today due to an unmovable conflict is Ellen Hammond from the Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District, and Jason Callahan from Green Diamond will be joining us late. So appreciate that there are times when conflicts can't be avoided, but really appreciate as much commitment to being able to be part of these meetings as possible. But also just understand that sometimes conflicts come up you can't avoid. So welcome, everyone. In addition to the new members and just updates on who's going to be with us today, just as a kind of a icebreaker, just what food makes your mouth water in the summer in Oregon? You can just put that in the chat, and we can help us all kind of think about the great season ahead that we're moving into, and all the great things that the bounty of Oregon provides.
Andrea, speaking of everything you can eat along the hiking trail, I just ate some thimbleberries, and so I was reminded that they're just like this beautiful cross between like cherries and raspberries. They're just so unique. So love it.
And I am having hard, oh, there we go. I was not able to find my chat, so thanks for jumping in on that. Black cap raspberries, that's another good one along the same lines. Hermiston melons, I have had a hankering for watermelons lately. strawberries. I thought about changing this question to what produce did people pick when they were kids? But I don't know if that's relevant today. I don't know if kids go out and pick strawberries and things like that. But I know I picked good strawberries, which I appreciated because they were bigger than the other strawberries. So they filled your basket faster.
We just blinked and the Oregon strawberry season is over now. It just makes me so sad.
Salmon berries, awesome. Yeah. Yeah, and tomatoes and corn coming on, maybe a little later, but always the best. Nothing like tomato sandwiches and an ear of corn for dinner.
So Kathy, while people are still putting their foodstuffs in the chat, I just want to let you know that for some reason today, especially, a lot of people are having trouble getting into the meeting. So Jen is busy working with Mike McCarthy and Nikita Vincent. I believe Jasmine was able to, yep, Jasmine's with us. So I just wanted to let you know that people are working on joining.
I like Jonathan's addition of wine. I think it counts.
Totally counts. Salmon berries.
Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes WebEx can be challenging, especially for a first timer. So appreciate that we might need to take a little bit of time. Maybe if you want to just kind of preview what we're hoping to hear from our new workforce and training contractors today, just to put a little more specifics in terms of where they are in the process and what we're expecting to hear, that might be a good
sure
depth on.
Sure, and or I can keep going through some housekeeping things.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So Jen, in between all that you're doing, if you could hit next slide, please. Okay, so an update on the fact sheets. As we have been dutifully trying to get them out to you for the last couple months, we have made one on the land-based net carbon inventory, explaining what it is all by itself. And then also making a fact sheet on the agriculture sector and how the inventories in Oregon track the agriculture sector. We are very nearly there with both of those. DEQ has reviewed them. We have an iterative process that's been really good. And we're just trying to format to make sure that they are in an accessible format. And so just a few days out, and I should be able to share those with you with like the meeting notes and whatnot. And feel free to reach out with questions if you are reading through the fact sheet and have them.
And Liz, in particular, the reason to kind of focus in on agriculture is that it is addressed in both the sector-based emissions and natural and working land. So
Yes.
trying to clarify that it's a little different than most of our other sectors, but so just to kind of help clarify what's in each of the different accounting systems.
Yep, absolutely. Trying to be responsive to all the great feedback that you gave us during the first and second meetings. We're already working on a natural climate solutions fact sheet. What are natural climate solutions? And so, and that one should go a bit faster than these other two that we're really getting kind of into the inventory tool itself. So that will be next. If you have ideas for more fact sheets, what might be helpful for you and or others, please, we are all ears. It's a resource kind of series that we figure we'll continue making, and hopefully they'll be pretty evergreen. We also, Jason has been working with you all to update our roster and create profiles, so that, which has been posted to the webpage. I'm trying to do multiple things at once, which is always hard. And so the link is in the chat, and that will send you to the advisory committee webpage. And if you scroll to the bottom, it says roster and profile. So thank you for everyone for getting back to Jason and working with Jason on that. In a PDF will be easier for us to update if information changes. And so that is how that will be displayed on the website. Still into resources from y'all. If you're reading something about natural climate solutions, carbon removal strategies, the benefits of these actions, and/or a cool picture you'd like to send us, love to highlight photos of you guys doing things or the nature and the working lands that you are situated in during our presentations and in other ways. So please do send those. Also, we, in our suggestion box last time, we got the suggestion that maybe we should use a Google Doc instead of a Miro board. The Miro board is a little bit complex, maybe overly complex, when a Google Doc will do. So Jason, if you could put that Google Doc in the chat. Sorry, it got noisy on my end. That'd be great. This Google Doc will be open during this meeting. It is for you to put thoughts if you'd like to put them there instead of in the chat. You're always welcome to put thoughts in the chat, and we'll try to monitor the chat. Or if you'd like to say good job, I'll take that too all the time. All righty, next slide, Jen. Thank you. Okay, so contract updates. The land-based net carbon inventory contractors are nearly signed. So the language itself is all final. It's at a final review at the DOJ, and so that should occur shortly. And really, we already know that they have a conflict with the next advisory committee meeting. And so it may be that the first time that we gather with them is in August. And it looks like Nikita has been able to join us. So just want to, where are you, Nikita? And having a hard time turning on her camera. And that is okay. We're glad you're here. Did you want to take yourself off mute and say hello?
I can definitely do that. I'm still trying to figure out the video situation, so my apologies for not being present.
That is okay. Hi, did you, Kathy, the Chair McDonald gave you kind of an introduction while you were not here. Would you like to give yourself an introduction to others?
Sure, I would love the opportunity. My name is Nikita Vincent. I am the owner of and operator of Twig and Bloom Flower Farm. I'm also the founder and coordinator of the Cultural Harvest Collective in Monmouth, Oregon, and I'm currently working with the City of Monmouth on starting a cooperative grocery store, and also on the board of the Oregon Agricultural Trust. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We're so glad to have you. Okay. All righty. So moving on, the Natural Climate Solutions and Metrics project, we had kind of paused a little bit while our procurement staff and we were working on evaluating the two other projects and proposals we got from people. And so we have picked that back up and it will be published on Oregon Buys very soon. Imagine that will be about a 2 to 3 month process to get that contract out the door. The Natural Climate Solutions Workforce Development and Training Programs study, that contract is signed and the contracted team is here with us today to do some work with us today, and we're so excited. Where we have been, so have worked with the contractors, let them know that we did some work with each other during our last meeting, and we have sent them that information as well as that slide deck so that they know what the conversation was and the questions we asked. They have created some questions for you today and to facilitate great discussion. And they're going to take a bit of time to discuss why we chose them, who they are, what they do, the team they put together. So really look forward to getting there and to that point. But before we do, Jen, next slide. As mentioned, Jason is going to do a quick report highlight from the International Labor Organization on nature-based solutions. It is entitled Decent Work in Nature-Based Solutions. Jason.
Yeah, thanks for the intro there. And thank you everyone for responding very quickly to the profiles. I hope we ended up getting something that was useful for you all. Felt a little weird going through people's like LinkedIn profiles and so forth, trying to get information together, but it helped me understand everyone's backgrounds and where you're coming from at this work. So thank you again. All right, next slide, Jen. So as Liz said, well, just as a reminder, I am the research analyst within the Department of Energy and the climate action team. So pretty much one of my main duties is reading through reports and getting an idea of where the research and where the work is currently on the various lines of work that we are doing here at Department of Energy. And so one of the things that I wanted to break into, in part based on the Miro board exercise that we did last time, where we had you all write down jobs and potential skills and so forth that would be needed in order to implement natural climate solutions on different land cover types, is I wanted to look into the literature on how jobs are being described currently within the natural climate solution realm. And the truth is that there's honestly not a whole lot of publications out currently, basically none, on the workforce in the natural climate solutions realm. If you kind of zoom up or like reduce the restriction within definition, or, you know, that's the wrong way to describe it. If you instead back up and start at nature-based solutions, there ends up being a little more literature available. And this one report that came out in 2024 from the International Labor Organization looked at the current state and possible futures of the workforce related to nature-based solutions. And we thought that some of the results or the key points that they brought up in this report would be relevant for you all, both for the workforce work that we're doing, but also the future of workforce studies once we're done with this round of examination. Next slide. So getting at what I was talking about there before, so natural climate solutions are considered a subset of nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions are broadly actions to protect, sustainably use, manage, and restore ecosystems, which address societal challenges. And those challenges can be anything from the effects of climate change to like trying to improve biodiversity, things like that. But natural climate solutions are this subset that is very much focused on carbon sequestration and natural working lands that maintain or increase ecosystem resilience and well-being. And critically, natural climate solutions do not move ecosystems further from their natural state. However, most of the nature-based solutions that get explored in this 2024 report from the ILO qualify as natural climate solutions. So I felt like it would be relevant to talk about it here. Next slide, please. So one of the key things they did was produce a survey globally of nature-based solution practitioners that identified key and technical and core skills needed for nature-based solution implementation. And you can see here in this figure that there are a broad range of technical and core skills, some of them very specific to the environment, such as application of ecosystems, biodiversity knowledge in this technical skills column, monitoring evaluation of nature-based solution benefits, tree planting and growing. These are like very environmentally specific skill sets. However, you'll notice that some of these other ones are more broad, or that can be applied or developed in other fields, such as policy design and advocacy, social science field technique methods, data analysis, and things of that nature. And then there's this whole other set of core skills that are translatable across, you know, many different types of careers. Collaboration with stakeholders, effective communication being ranked like the highest, project management. So there's a whole diversity of skills that are necessary in order to build this workforce or build an effective workforce in nature-based solutions and also natural climate solutions. And they identify that addressing skill gaps requires targeted training, increased funding, and stronger policy support to facilitate sustainable career paths in NBS. And I'm going to emphasize career paths as opposed to simply jobs in NBS. And we'll talk about that in the next slides. Can you move to the next one, please? Thank you. So in that Miro board exercise, we identified different occupations in natural climate solutions. And similarly, different natural or nature-based solutions necessitate different skills and occupations. So in this table here that was in the report, you can see that in the broad nature-based solution-related activity of restoration, you need skills such as data analysis, implementation, restoration techniques, environmental and ecological monitoring, communication. And that comes with, or that's associated with a whole lot of different occupations, from project managers to environmental scientists to civil engineers to consultants. And so there are, again, a major or a very large range of occupations and skills that are required across these different nature-based solution activities and natural climate solutions. Next slide, please. So one of the other things they highlight is that the nature-based solutions workforce needs will evolve over time. In the early stages of implementation, most of the jobs or many of the jobs tend to be focused on lower skilled workers in construction and implementation, and some medium and high skilled workers in design and permitting exercises, kind of going back to those skills that we talked about earlier. But then later on, once you have these natural climate solutions or nature-based solutions on the ground, then there's a shift in need toward low and medium skilled workers for maintenance, and then medium and high skilled workers for monitoring, evaluation, adapting old designs to new needs, et cetera. So going back to that concept of not just a need for jobs, but careers, thinking about how do we transition some of the workers perhaps that were working on these early needs into long-term natural climate solutions needs, which may require upskilling, reskilling, communication of career paths, things like that. And we'll talk a bit more about that on the next slide, please. So some of the challenges that they identified were that, particularly in the early phases of natural climate solutions implementation or nature-based solutions, that there are a lot of temporary, informal, and project-based nature for many of these jobs. There are a lot of skills gaps and lack of access to capital, particularly in low income and traditionally underserved areas. And there's a need for new interdisciplinary skills to merge traditional work with environmental sciences and ecosystems management. If you think back to that figure on the different technical skills and core skills, not every worker needs all of those skills, but probably most workers are going to need a better mix of those skills, which again requires fixing some of these skills gaps or filling some of these skill gaps. And then finally, a lack of communication to young people about career pipelines in this work is really critical to think about going forward. I can speak from my own background. I did not realize that I could potentially have this kind of career outside of like teaching in the environment. I did some field work back during my undergraduate, but I didn't really consider it sort of a long-term career and had to like figure this out. But it's not like a counselor ever sat me down and like work through the steps of like how you would actually end up at Odo, for example, from my early start doing tree cores out in Western Colorado. So next slide, please. And some of the key report recommendations are to strengthen and align state and national nature-based solution policy frameworks to capitalize on progress made at the global level. So that can be, capitalizing on improved science to understand the effects of nature-based solutions, construction techniques, monitoring techniques, scientific, technical advances made in other locations, and bringing it to the various parts of Oregon or the broader U.S. are really critical. Investing in skills development and workforce training, and that's both short-term investment as well as long-term investment, again, because these careers will have to transition over time. There's a clear need to promote rights and inclusivity in the nature-based solutions workforce. Some of these jobs worldwide have a higher percentage of, say, youth workers than the general workforce does. So it emphasizes, or a lot of people, particularly with low skills, can get into this, implementing nature-based solutions on the ground. But that's not a given. Some places actually it ends up being an older workforce. So trying to bring in both youth, women, and other marginalized or underserved communities is really critical, and certainly an opportunity to help this or to help promote this work going forward. And then finally, there's a clear need for strengthening research and data collection to inform better decision making. So this is not just set and forget solutions, to use a term that we talk about all the time in climate adaptation. This is work that you have to maintain, you have to monitor, you have to verify that it's actually doing what you hope that it's doing. So there's a there's a really clear need for data collection, and we see that already in a lot of the natural climate solutions we're implementing already in Oregon. And that's it for me. Sorry, didn't have very much time, but I just wanted to hit some highlights here, and hopefully it helps set the stage for talking with our contractor.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
I see everyone who's having difficulty joining before has joined. So we have been successful. Welcome everyone who's having issues, and we're going to work on that. So maybe it doesn't happen next time. So you might get some follow-up emails from me to just figure out exactly what was going on. First, does anyone have any questions or thoughts or comments, ideas from what Jason ran through, or did anything strike you?
Yeah, this is Mike. I have a comment.
Hi, Mike.
Sorry, I got on a little late, so I might have missed something. What I notice here is it seemed to be kind of top end loaded. And by that, I mean a lot of more policy analysis and planning than focus towards on the ground work. And having done a lot of the on ground work myself, I think that's where the rubber meets the road, where we can really achieve things. And it seems, and the work I've done over the years, I've essentially donated all of my time. And I think if there's a way to put adequate money into on the ground work, the workforce development will not be a problem. It'll happen automatically, except the very top end analysis and policy work. So I just feel like we need to really work hard to shift enough money and enough focus on the ground work. And I think it'll take care of itself. There's a lot of contractors that would love to do this work. But obviously in this time frame, the money's not there, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Mike, just one quick comment. I thought the point that Jason made from the study that was done, that sometimes some of the opportunities aren't really raised early enough on, so people see themselves in careers. And one of the things that sticks out in my mind was Diane Hasse, who was the Forest Service Western Reforestation and Nurseries lead. She said she got all the way through her forestry degree at OSU and just by happenstance learned about the whole nursery side of the business. And so while I agree with you to some extent, if we can, that the workforce will come to us, I think there are gaps that I'm hoping we'll identify as part of this project of where we need to kind of strengthen communication or think about workforce in a way to help address whatever barriers there are.
Thank you, Kathy. Who was up first? Jocelyn?
I'm not sure if I was first, but I'll go. Yeah, I relate to Mike's story. I studied conservation biology, did prairie restoration, then I got into environmental education. Now I'm working with farmers, certified crop advisors. So there's never a clear pathway, but I think it's really important to help the upcoming next generation, whether they're in a trade school or undergraduate program. So I love that this is part of it. But my observation of the study shared, and I understand it was an international study, and I think it's really good to look at those, but the nature-based solutions, it seemed a lot was focused on habitats and nature sources of climate. But given that we're doing also working lands, so farms, thinking about farms, let's not forget there are agronomists, there are certified crop advisors, there's people with a lot of great knowledge that work with farmers that I hope will be part of the Oregon study. And I just wanted to share that perspective because that report, what at least a few slides, I didn't see anything to do really with working with farmers as much as with habitats.
It's so very true. Yep. Thank you for highlighting that, Jocelyn. They definitely had a focus. So,
Yeah.
Megan?
I noticed a focus on kind of these on the ground projects and all of the kind of different levels of support that are needed for on the ground projects and the way that project might be implemented that needs monitoring and that kind of thing. But one thing that I didn't hear a lot about here was the kind of technical assistance or capacity that might be needed in terms of the way that we think about it as farm service providers or folks who can help support producers on the ground with implementation. And that wasn't really represented, that big gap in terms of what's actually needed to support producers in getting these projects done besides just work that someone's got to have the technical understanding and the understanding on funding opportunities that are available and that kind of thing to make them happen.
Great point. And all good things that help us lead into our next topic. Does anyone else have any more comments before we go there? Okay. Thank you. As always, such great feedback. Okay.
I have one little clarification. I had a little regret about the way I said that. So it is not true that all farmers need support to implement projects. Some farmers can implement projects by themselves. They have the resources, they have capacity, they know how to search out grants and funding. A lot of producers do not have that capacity to write a grant, for example, themselves. It's not the kind of thing they want to be doing with their time. And so that's just to clarify that.
Thanks for that clarification. I think a good, maybe a similar analogy is just, you know, kind of like the Small Business Administration or like the technical and support services that in other areas and fields that provide help to people doing the thing, whatever the thing is that they need to do, if they need the help. Maybe they don't need the help, but yes, totally appreciate that clarification. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Here we are. We're about right on time and ready to dig into do some work with Estelano Advisors and their team. Cynthia Guzman is leading that team. I duplicated the slide from last time just as an introduction to them. Of course, we had some things we asked for in the scope of work, and they're going to go through their approach and also just introduce themselves to you. Cynthia, would you like to take it away from here? Well, we need to actually, would you like us to, well, we do need to switch slides. So we need to take down our slides so you guys can share.
Great.
And then I also want to offer, when you get to the discussion part, if you feel like seeing people's faces, you can always ask Jen to like take down the presentation and pop it up, or, you know, do as you will with that.
Sure, that's a good idea. We'll do that when we get to the feedback session. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Glad to see you all virtually on this wonky WebEx platform, but here we are. So my name's Cynthia Guzman, and I'm a principal at Estelano Advisors, and we're here to give you all an overview of the study that we're kicking off. We just, as Liz said, we just got the contract set up this week. And are really excited to get to meet you all and work with you over the next couple of months, and really tap into your expertise as we develop this study. Let's go to the next slide, please. So today we'd like to spend our time on three things. First, we really want you all to get to know us. We've got a really great team here of interdisciplinary planners, policy folks, data folks, that hopefully will be working together during the course of this project. We want to familiarize you all with our scope of work and what you might expect to see over the next couple of months. And then we also have some questions for you and hope to engage with you all in dialogue and begin to tap into your respective expertise and really help inform this study. Next slide. So we'll start with introductions of the three firms. So I'm a principal at Estelano Advisors. We're an urban planning and public policy consulting firm with offices in Portland, the Bay Area, and Los Angeles. I'm based in Los Angeles. We have a really long history of collaboration and partnership with organizations and individuals that are planning for current and future workforce needs, particularly in climate-related sectors. We've established relationships with regional and state workforce policymakers and community-based organizations throughout the West Coast, and really ensuring that our projects tap into what's actually happening in the region. We're urban planners by training, so we really have an interdisciplinary approach to our work. I lead our firm's climate infrastructure practice, but we've also got folks on staff that are economic development experts, experts in transportation. So we bring that to bear for this project, wherein we really love to bring an integrated kind of holistic approach to our work. I'll hand it over to the ECHO team to introduce themselves.
Great, thank you. I'll start. So I'm Andrew Dyke. I'm an economist and partner here at ECHO Northwest, and we're as you can see on the slide, a public policy research firm. We're multidisciplinary, many of you are familiar with us probably by a long and deep history in Oregon and have been expanding into other parts of the country. We have a very strong, what used to be called natural resources unit. They're now called the environment sector of the company, but have historically done a lot of work on the kinds of questions that the climate solutions are designed to address. Very familiar with working lands, et cetera. I work primarily in what we now call our people cluster, and that encompasses, in my world, workforce development, but also education, early childhood care and education, all the way through out into workforce analyses themselves. So we have a lot of overlap, and we'll be relying on staff from both of those sectors for this project. And we'll describe a little bit of our project work that has done similar things in the recent past in a couple of slides here. And I will turn it over to Peyton.
Not much else to add. I think, Andrew, you covered it all. But yeah, we're mainly doing a lot of the occupational and workforce things in this project, and we'll preview that in a couple of slides. So
Thanks both. And we should also mention Kimimela Consulting. So that is a Oregon-based firm led by Serena Fasthorse, and they're an Indigenous engagement firm that cultivates meaningful collaboration between agencies, organizations, and Indigenous communities. So they will be essential to our engagement process throughout this work. Serena couldn't be here today, but sends her regards, and we hope to bring her in and have her have some FaceTime with you all as the project continues, and we'll do our best to represent her experience as part of this presentation. Next slide. So this is our fearless consultant team that you see up on the screen. A lot of folks couldn't be here today, but we'll do our best to share a little bit about each one. I'll start by sharing a little bit about myself. So I've been with my firm, Estelano Advisors, for over 10 years. And really the work that I've focused on throughout my career has been advising public, private, and philanthropic clients on projects that are at the intersection of climate resilience and workforce development. And I've worked on a lot of projects throughout my career that look at the workforce development potential of infrastructure investments. So one of my earliest assignments in this work was as a researcher supporting a project that evaluated workforce development opportunities and pathways in stormwater infrastructure in Philadelphia. So this was as a result of the city's stormwater pollution settlement with the EPA. So they were really interested in figuring out where to hone in their investments in order to make sure that we could create pathways into jobs into the green stormwater infrastructure sector. So that ended up being a lot of operations and maintenance jobs that offered pathways to good work with limited training, with some training, but sort of time bound, and allowed some opportunities for underrepresented communities to access these jobs, which was really interesting. I've also advised public and private and philanthropic organizations in my hometown here in Los Angeles on the workforce development opportunities that have come about through the Safe Clean Water Program, which is our local stormwater funding measure, which has invested over $600 million in projects since 2018. I've also served as an environmental regulator. I've served on our region's LA Regional Water Quality Control Board for 5 years, as appointed by the governor. I've also done a fair amount of work in Oregon, so I'm no stranger to Oregon, even though I'm not physically located there at the moment. I've worked with Oregon Metro in the past in the development of their construction careers policy, which was this regional policy that aimed to increase the participation of women and people of color in the construction workforce. I've also done a fair amount of work with some of the workforce boards in the Portland, Vancouver region, essentially supporting them in the development of their quality jobs framework, which was a strategy to coordinate their activities to drive the placement of job seekers into quality jobs in their area. So that's enough about me. I'll talk a little bit about my co-principal here, Rahi Reddy. I believe, hopefully one or two of you may be familiar with her. She is based in Portland. She directs our Pacific Northwest office, and her portfolio has included assisting community, labor, governmental stakeholders in delivering equitable outcomes through things like community benefits agreement and workforce strategies. So she will be essential to this project. She is local to Oregon, so that would be really, really, really important. She was actually our client at Oregon Metro when we worked on the Construction Careers Project, as she served as equity director at the time. Since joining EA, she has advised a variety of workforce collaboratives in the Seattle and Portland areas, as well as in the Bay Area. So you will see her eventually as the project continues. Ellen, I'll hand it over to you to quickly introduce ourselves. Ellen will serve as co-project manager on this project.
Thank you, Cynthia. Hello, everyone. I'm Ellen Binney. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an associate at Estelano Advisors in their Portland office. And I started there in October of last year. And I'm focusing in the practice area of equitable economic development and have had the opportunity to work on some great workforce development projects so far, including a recent workforce alignment strategy with the city of Seattle, which over the course of 6 months coordinated 9 different city departments to help align their workforce development program investments for greater impact in terms of expanding access to career path, high-paying jobs for city residents. And that was a really great project because it shows a city's commitment to this kind of work during a time that they're facing budget shortfall by really sort of doubling down on expanding sectors that they actually have strengths in, because they have some city-owned utilities like Seattle City Light that are poised for lots of growth and also intersect with the sort of climate resilience sphere. So I'm really excited about this project as an opportunity to sort of delve further into that intersection of workforce development and climate solutions. And I actually have some background working at Odo, I should mention, as an intern there a few years ago when I was pursuing my planning master's degree within Allen's division. And that project for me was to develop the state's first electric school bus guidebook. And I should mention that stakeholder engagement, as with this project, was a huge focus of that project as well, because we needed to kind of pound the pavement and talk to lots of people. I interviewed, I think, almost 50 different stakeholders representing various different facets of that work, from, you know, actually transportation workers at school districts to, you know, managers of funds to help school districts buy these buses, to advocates and federally recognized tribes. And yeah, that was sort of a great introduction to the work that Odo does, a very varied work. And I look forward to an opportunity to dig once again into the resilience sphere through a state agency. And I'll just lastly really briefly mention that I'm also really passionate about this project because prior to entering the field of planning, I did work for about a decade in local food systems work on market farms and research farms and for a coffee company. And I just am really excited to see how this space of looking at that as a climate solution is developing in real time. And I will pass it over to, should we pass it to Echo now, to Andrew?
Sure, let's do that.
Great, thank you.
Yep. So, I'm Andrew again, and a little bit more about my background. I'm an economist, PhD economist by training. I focused on labor economics and public finance in grad school. And strangely enough, labor economists do not necessarily work in workforce development, but I've been with ECHO for about 20 years. And very soon after starting my career here at ECHO, started looking at regional, local workforce development systems, doing resource mapping, identifying programs and dollars attached, and have since expanded out to the state and have done some state resource mapping efforts, and have been, I would say, over the decades, increasingly involved in different types of workforce development projects. Also, fairly early in my career, I did an evaluation for a statewide workforce training program. One of the things we like to do with obviously data analysis, but in a lot of cases, the state has access to data that is not publicly available, and through data sharing agreements, we can get richer data to help better identify interesting sectors of the economy. And I would say that is potentially particularly relevant here. We've done a number of different studies in recent years. I'll talk about one of them in a few minutes here, but about industries or sectors that are not well defined or well captured in publicly available administrative data. And to get at those, so things like travel and tourism, the forestry industry, which is what I'll talk about, natural climate solutions workforce. It's not easy to go to a Bureau of Labor Statistics database or et cetera, and identify this is the natural climate solutions work sector. So to get a better view of the sector, it's important to do a lot of on-the-ground work, engagement, talk to people. How does the official coding schema misrepresent your sector? What needs to be added? What needs to be subtracted? What can we do about it? What can confidential state data, accessible through data sharing agreements, do to improve our characterization of the industry and help better understand the characteristics of the workforce? I think also interesting, and so I'm very excited about this project, but typically, or at least historically, I think we see interest in workforce development wax and wane with the business cycle. Not surprisingly, when the economy is not doing well, people are interested in how do we get people back into jobs. When the economy is doing very well, the reverse has been true historically. But I'd say in recent years, coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing a different trend. And some of that is related to interest in climate, where there are a lot of initiatives going on at the local level, state level, national level that will have a big impact on the workforce of the associated sectors. And so there's a lot of energy around some of these questions, even though at this point the economy is doing relatively well. So it'll be interesting to layer those two things on top. Last thing I'll say, and then I'll introduce a couple of people who aren't here, is that, well, yes, so I mentioned this already, but interested in this project in part because of the collaboration within ECHO Northwest. We'll be able to have collaboration with myself and Melissa Rowe, my colleague here, not here, but colleague on the screen, who do a lot of workforce work with our natural resources team that includes Sarah Rich. And so I will talk about both of them. Melissa will be our analytics lead. She's been with ECHO, I think, about 13 years. I've worked with her closely on many projects, many workforce development projects, and among other things, she knows how to look at data, view data, and analyze data, and look at summaries of the data, and to digest it in a way that is meaningful to readers. She'll be providing a lot of analytic support on this project. And then Sarah Rich, our Natural Climate Solutions Advisor. She comes from our environment practice. She does a lot of work in watershed management are some of her specialties, but also socioeconomic dimensions of environmental planning and environmental impact assessment. She's worked with federal and state agencies on a lot of environmental issues. She knows the NEPA process very well, has done a lot of work on green infrastructure projects, and I think so will bring a lot of experience to bear on this project. And with that, I will turn it over to Peyton again.
Hi all, I'm Peyton. I use she, her pronouns. I am a project manager at ECHO Northwest. in my previous job, I worked on workforce development and provided technical assistance for communities in rural and remote areas looking to gain funds for either community change grants, specifically related to natural climate solutions and workforce development for underserved or underprivileged communities, historically underprivileged communities in New Mexico, specifically working with universities, Western New Mexico University specifically. And I'm interested in kind of the overlap between equity and equitable transitions to a greener economy. And so I have some background there. So I'll be providing project management support here on this project, and I'm very excited to move forward.
Thank you both. And again, really quickly, Serena Fasthorse is our tribal liaison for this project. She's a Lakota and Blackfeet member and has also done a lot of work in collaboration with the Indigenous community and local state public agencies to guide partnerships and really help on the collaboration and facilitation front. So she'll be essential to this project as well. So that's the team. Let's move on to our experience. I'm going to share a little bit about some of the projects Estelano Advisors has taken on over the years. Some of them based here in California, but another based here in Oregon as well. We just completed the study for LA Metro, which is our local public transportation agency. It's a regional construction industry workforce disparity study. The agency was interested to see how well they were doing in terms of hiring women on construction projects. There's a lot of investment going into our public transportation system here in Los Angeles, and they were really interested to see how contractors were doing relative to a 6.9% hiring goal that I believe was set in the Carter administration. So we went ahead and did the analysis of both how contractors were doing by looking at certified payroll and looking at those hours, job hours, and how that translated into actual numbers. Then we also took a forward-looking lens and mapped out what are some of the projects that are coming online over the next 5 to 10 years, not just for the agency itself, but also looking regionally at other large public agencies, big mega projects, large sporting events coming into the region in the next decade or so, and really look at what the demand would actually be for female construction workers, and actually demonstrating those numbers. So that was on the data side, but we also looked at the supply side. We talked to workers, we talked to training programs, and really took a look at some of the kind of more qualitative barriers that may prevent women from entering, remaining, and advancing in the construction industry. And we got a lot of really rich and informative data and translated that into recommendations for investments around respectful workplaces, childcare, and other sorts of supports that could really help make a dent in that number and really help drive it a little higher. And I will say that currently we're facilitating a table of public agencies that are trying to take a regional approach to addressing that very topic. What are some of the common actions or investments they can take to really support women in advancing in the construction industry? So that's something that we recently completed and are continuing now. Similar methodology for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program market study. This is a bridge between Oregon and Washington, large mega project. The agencies really use this as an opportunity to map out not just the jobs that would come about as a result of the bridge construction, but also taking a regional approach and seeing what are some of the things that are happening, other projects that are happening in the area. Because at the end of the day, our workforce is regional, and construction workers float around between job to job, agency to agency. So this also contains some recommendations, not just in terms of quantitative numbers in terms of demand, but also some policy and interventions and recommendations to really support underrepresented workers to get into these jobs. Last but not least, we're currently working with the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG, on a natural and ag lands benefit study. So this study is really intended to address the information gap that we have here in Southern California and perhaps in other parts of the country as it relates to ecosystem services, resilience benefits, and economic benefits of natural and agricultural lands in the 6-county SCAG region down here. So we're leading a stakeholder engagement process that includes mapping and focus groups, and we're engaging city and county staff, farm workers, natural resource agencies, tribal communities, land trusts, you name it, in order to inform the development of the study. So that's currently underway as we speak. I'll hand it over to Echo for the next slide to talk about their experience.
Great, thank you. Yes, so like I mentioned, we've been doing, or I've been doing, and now with the support of Peyton, workforce development studies in Oregon, but also in other places. These 3 studies are relatively recent Oregon statewide studies, and all follow a similar sort of approach, but with some variations, and I'll try to highlight the differences in each. First, and as of this morning, the report on the left, the forestry workforce study under the HEC, was approved, so we're very excited about that. But this is a study about an industry that is not very well captured in administrative data. There are a lot of operators and so on that work in the woods, so to speak, and are not well captured in standard data sources. So we devoted a lot of energy to first defining the industry or the sector from the perspective of the administrative data, the available data, and then expanded it to accommodate the relatively large share of the workforce that operates outside of the standard classifications. But in terms of project flow, with all these projects, these workforce analyses, we start with that industry definition stage, making sure that what we're calling the industry aligns with what people in the field, those in the industry actually call themselves or think of themselves. Then move into quantitative data analysis, supplemented always with stakeholder engagement, focus groups, interviews to help refine the definition, help identify occupations, business entities, again, that we do not see in the quantitative data. And then we move into, depending on the project, various analyses of forward-looking. What is the workforce going to look like in the future? And we did that in the case of the forestry workforce study. Similar kind of process for the Oregon Clean Energy Workforce Coalition. This was slightly different, similar process in that there are a number of different definitions floating around for the clean energy workforce. We needed to align on one for the purposes of the report that aligned with the client's interest, and we did so. And the focus of this study was really workforce needs, but based on specific scenarios going forward. Obviously, clean energy is an area where we anticipate, and as of then anticipated a lot more, investments in clean energy going forward. And the idea was to try to quantify at a fairly high level, what are the workforce needs associated with Biden's Infrastructure Act, with Build Back Better, et cetera, and other types of funding. So similar kind of approach as to the forestry study, but somewhat different kind of data collection. We spent a fair amount of time trying to understand the funding streams and what they were trying to accomplish. Then moving on to another similar study of the semiconductor assessment, also conducted for the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. This is an industry that is much better captured by standard data sources. We can find some codes and industry classifications that the data aren't always available, but at least the definitions are there that allow us to talk about a concise industry. The training pathways into the industry are generally fairly well defined. We can look at the data on outcomes and paint a fairly coherent quantitative picture, which is less true in the other 2 studies there, where training pathways are often fairly informal and there's very little quantitative data. And so we try to bring all of these concepts together for any given project to really understand, for a specific industry, how do we define it? What does its workforce look like? Again, based both on quantitative data and on qualitative data through stakeholder engagement. And then what does the workforce look like going forward? And where are the gaps in terms of training pathways, in terms of workers, potentially available for those positions, and so on. So those, and I will, I'm not sure who's next, but I will turn it over to the next slide.
I'll briefly talk about Serena's experience here. I'll just focus on one project. I really want to highlight some of the work that Serena led with the Oregon Tribal Water Task Force. This project came about as a response of a joint letter from 9 tribes to the governor requesting engagement on water issues, and Serena served as the primary facilitator of that table. She developed communications, coordinated meetings, developed reports, really representing the tribal interest through those conversations. And the final report really touched on things like integrating cultural values, really baking in consultations with tribes when it comes to policy and project development, frequent and consistent communication, and other recommendations to improve water quality and use between state and tribes. Very needed expertise for our project, certainly. Let's go on to our next slide. So now that you know all about us, I want to switch over to the scope of work. We'll also go through this very briefly because I do realize we've been talking for quite a bit and we want to hear you speak. Our scope has 10 tasks total, but for purposes of this presentation, we've really condensed it into 3 phases of work. One is the engagement and data collection phase, and this includes a variety of interviews, desk research, engagement with standing working groups and committees, such as this one. Phase 2 is the analysis and integration phase. So this includes data collection and the creation of occupational profiles and workforce development and training program profiles. This is going to require a fair amount of coordination between Estelano advisors and the ECHO Northwest team. We'll also perform an assessment on the scale and composition of the natural climate solutions workforce as we define it in phase 1. And then for phase 3, we're going to bring it all together. Our team will evaluate the robustness of the natural climate solutions workforce development program ecosystem, and then identify any challenges, needs, gaps that may affect its ability to meet the state's climate goals. We're also going to make recommendations for partnerships, programs, policies, and data collection improvements that could help put the state on the path to a more robust NCS workforce ecosystem. So a tall order, but we're going to make it work. Next slide. So I'll talk about the phase 1 data engagement and data collection work. This is an area that Estelano advisors will primarily lead with collaboration with Serena. We'll lead the engagement with the working groups and workforce partners to help inform the deliverables of the study. And as we've noted in our experience, we really know how to facilitate conversations that really initiate meaningful and inclusive collaboration across organizational roles, identities, and communities. For this task, we're really looking at 2 parallel tracks, the partner interviews and the working group engagement. So partner interviews, this is everyone from tribal-related partners, workforce development experts, training organizations, and key employers. We're missing folks here, but that's generally the area of folks that we want to talk to. And we have about 25 stakeholder interviews slotted for that. Then there's also the engagement with working groups such as yourselves. You all have set meetings for a couple of months now, as well as some of the other working groups. So we're going to be bringing periodic updates to you all on how the study is going, in order to get some additional input that we will be able to integrate into the eventual study. So one of the ways in which we'll kind of organize our work is work very closely with Odo to come up with that interview list. And we're going to ask a little bit more about that interview list today. We'd really love your input on that, as well as developing sort of a interview protocol or questions that will then guide the remainder of our engagement. And then we'll bring it all together. So that's phase 1. And then phase 2, if you can go to the next slide. Andrew or Peyton, I'll turn it over to you all to talk about the occupational profiles and the workforce assessment.
Yeah, thank you. So the first piece of the occupational assessment, our goal is, again, with given a coherent definition of all the sectors and subsectors in this industry, goal is to identify the occupations, the major occupations that the sector relies upon. These might be either the most common occupations or occupations that are critical and central to the activities within a sector or subsector of the natural climate climate solutions. So we've started working on this already. We'll end up with a sort of proposed industry definition, trying to define who's in, who's out in some sense, and start building out a list of potential occupations, hoping to leverage findings from the engagement process to some extent to help us round out that list. But then the goal here, first task, is to develop an occupational, I can't remember exactly what we're calling them, but a template for each occupation that lists key occupational key occupational characteristics, things like skills needed, education requirement, training pathways available, typical wages, demographics of the occupation, et cetera, to provide a really concise description of the occupations, again, that are critical and central to the various subsectors of this industry. So that'll be the first part. And then we will take that work and build off of it to produce a more comprehensive description of the workforce, looking more broadly, using both the quantitative and ideally qualitative data, try to describe recent trends in the workforce as defined above, as well as projections into the future to think about under status quo conditions, what might happen. And then we can start to think about, well, if the status quo doesn't hold, what is likely to happen going forward. And that feeds naturally into sort of the training program analysis. And I will turn that back over to Cynthia.
Thanks. Yes. So for this one, we're developing essentially profiles, brief descriptors of some of the training programs in the NCS sectors throughout the state. So this is what's going to inform this is a series of desktop research and interviews. First, we'll come up with a template similar to the occupational profiles. We'll come up with a training programs profile that captures some of the major key information items that we need to capture for each one of the programs, and develop that inventory. And we're also going to try to capture key characteristics such as things like cost of training, how many folks are being graduated from these training programs per year, for example, and other key considerations that we will try to emulate across all of the profiles. So this will also be an input into the eventual needs analysis to really understand what are the gaps in the sector, which will then inform our final reporting and recommendations around what are some of the trends that we see, what is the sort of the baseline workforce estimate for NCS occupations, and then what are some of the policy recommendations, actions that ODO can take or in collaboration with partners in order to really invest in key areas of this sector. So that could sort of form a roadmap or a action plan to inform future efforts. Okay, that's that slide. Next one. We have spoken quite a bit. Thank you so much for your patience. I will pause here and see if there's any clarifying questions about our scope of work or any other questions about our experience that we could talk about here today.
Thank you, guys. That was fabulous. I think I'll pipe up first. Advisory committee members, you may have noticed the timeline on this project is different than what we had previously communicated to you, and wanted to let you know that now that we have contractors on board and reviewed the work that needs to happen and to make the project as successful as possible, the timeline is the legislated timeline, which is September 15th, 2025, is very, 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 very short. And so we are in the process of submitting information to committees of the legislature that would let us move the deadline to December 1st, which is what the timeline is that the team proposed today. So just wanted to let you know that that is in the works and why the timeline is reflected here in the PowerPoint as it is. Two, I also just wanted to address, you may be wondering why they went through past projects or other projects that they have been working on. And we wanted to be responsive to previous input we got, I think, from the very first Miro board whiteboard exercise that we did together for a meeting. there were comments like, I really don't get the workforce part. Like, I just don't get it. And so we asked them to go through some of their projects to understand their brains and their field of work and what they do when they're doing workforce stuff, to help everyone imagine what information they're used to gathering, where they look, who they ask, where they're coming from when they're asking questions, and the kinds of things they may already know, or what kind of frameworks they're putting them into, and project approaches, and templates. So just wanted to kind of connect those dots in case you're like, well, why are we talking about really unrelated projects? But they are related in approach expertise and of course context of the work they do. So I just wanted to kind of put that out for everyone. Excited to get to the discussion part, but are there any other comments or questions?
Liz, can we take the slides down and just?
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah.
Liz, I have a question.
Yes. Go ahead, Betsy.
Hi, hey, thank you guys all for the really comprehensive overview of your past projects. Andrew, I know that you did some work for was it the Higher Ed Coordinating Commission study on workforce last year?
Well, let's see. I mean, so in the past, historically, we've done a number of Oregon statewide talent assessments. We did not do the most recent one, but we have done the forestry workforce study. Before that, we did housing production. That was at end of last year.
Yeah,
I believe
the forestry one is the one
the which forestry?
The forestry one is the one I was referring to, and I think it was pretty recent.
Yeah, well, like I said, approved by the committee today. So.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Congratulations. To what extent are you planning to draw from that information, if at all, in your work on the occupational analysis and workforce assessment?
I'd say as much as possible. I mean, there's clear overlap in, sort of the areas where natural climate solutions are going to be implemented and the forestry workforce as we've defined it. And as I mentioned, the forestry workforce as a whole is one that takes a lot more work to identify and characterize than in some other industries. And we did a lot of that work, and I think a lot of that work will provide a strong foundation for some of the subsectors we'll be talking about in this study.
Okay, thank you.
There was great intent to have these two studies integrate and not duplicate effort. So I'm glad to have you guys on board, given the experience in the other study.
Yeah, I mean, always looking to leverage what we've learned in recent times for new projects.
Yes, I asked because I seem to remember there was some reorganizing of the study results as you guys got toward the end.
Yep. Yeah, and the reorganization, the scope narrowed to some extent. It was sort of almost a last minute change, but originally the scope included both operations in forest as well as wood products manufacturing sort of in the mills. The pivot was towards focusing exclusively on the forest, and the definition was up until the mill door. So we still include trucking, log trucks, and so on, but I don't want to say more or less expunged wood products manufacturing from the study.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, from the perspective of a foundation, that's less relevant for this study, but it was a big change to how it was organized.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Dean? Where's Dean?
Dean's on mute.
Dean's on
Dean,
mute.
you have to unmute on the sidebar on your panelist, or somebody needs to unmute Dean, because I had that same problem. I thought I was unmuted, but because I wasn't unmuted on the sidebar, it didn't work.
Perhaps Jen can come to your rescue. Jen? Oh, you may be unmuted now. Can you speak, Dean? Oh, no. Shoot.
So one question from Ben is, is the forestry workforce report shareable? Is it posted someplace? And if so, can we get that?
Not yet, but we understand HEC plans to publish it next week.
Great. That sounds perfect.
Perhaps by the time these meeting minutes come out, I will be able to forward the link to advisory committee members.
How are you doing, Dean?
Okay, we're coming back to Dean.
Maybe Dean can chat in his question and we could respond to it as well.
Oh, that's a good point.
But can't we figure out a way to unmute people?
Yeah, I tried to unmute him, but I don't believe it worked.
Okay.
meaning it might be something on his computer side. He is typing right now.
Any other questions while we're waiting for Dean's typing? Megan?
Is there any, so it sounds like there will be some interviews and conversations with either as a group and then individuals possibly. And if we have folks that we might want to refer you to at some point, is there any funding available to compensate them for their time? When we ask folks to provide info, we always compensate them for BIPOC producers.
So not sure, Liz, if question for you. I mean, Megan, I completely agree. I think compensating folks for their time is a really important best practice. That is not part of our scope currently, but Liz may be looking to you if there's any flexibility there.
Sure. Let's take that up and talk about it a little bit.
Thanks.
Yes, had not thought of that. Thank you, Megan.
I guess I can also do it. We can also, if I refer you to someone, I could compensate them for participating. So it's something I can.
It's very kind and generous. Thank you. We'll figure
project budgets, I think, in the future if it's not included.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that.
Andrea?
Yeah, so when so some of us represent organizations where in order to get you the best information, it would be good to have the questions and what you're looking for ahead of any interviews. So will we be able to get that so then we can reach out to our organizations and kind of sum up some information?
Help think about who could be the best answers. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, that's a great question. That great comment. Yes, typically that is a best practice of ours. Once we have a list of folks that we intend to talk to, we usually send them a list of questions or data asks in advance of scheduling that conversation. So that is certainly something that we'll build into our design and process as part of this study. We are just getting a little bit ahead of myself. We are going to share with you all a Microsoft form where you could, if you have any suggestions for organizations or individuals to speak to, and we will follow that same practice before while reaching out to them if we do reach out to them.
So
I think the request is for you to be able to share the questions with this group, right, so they can help inform who you might talk to.
Right.
Sure, I can work with Liz and the team here to distribute that.
I was going to comment on this same thread there. Last time when we did that, I forget the system, but the Post-it notes. Yeah, I think we had a lot of good ideas on there. So I was just wondering, do you have access to that list of different places to get information and groups? Yes. Okay. And then my second question was, when you check back in with us, are we going to be a group that you asked for our opinion as well, or are you just checking back in to give us a summary of your interviews with the other groups?
That's a great question. Liz, hopefully you can chime in here. That is our intention, depending on when your next meeting is and where we are in relation to our study, because you all are meeting when you're meeting and we've got our own deliverables. So to the extent we could find areas of alignment there where we could share maybe an early draft of interview findings, or maybe a draft of some of the work that Echo Northwest is doing, that is exactly the area where we want your input. And so you could be able to provide input that way. We see your role with us as advising and providing your expertise and input into some of the things that we're developing. So absolutely.
Yes, whenever the team comes to this group and presents something, feedback and input and expertise is requested. And then if there's follow-up work, or, oh, I thought of this afterwards, or you should really talk to this person, please do email me. And, you know, and the project team so that we can like coordinate with like, okay, what do we do with this information? It'll never purely be an update, except maybe when we get to the very end, when their contract is about to end and the final report needs to get finished, then maybe it's an update. But during this whole process, yes, there'll be a chance for incorporating information.
Okay. Yeah. Just recognizing, I'm sure a lot of the folks on our committee have experience through their careers and they have opinions probably of what would have helped or what wouldn't have. We heard a little bit of that today. And I think even though we're not workforce development experts per se, I think just getting our opinions in a future meeting would be great.
Yes, which we're still getting to. So there's like discussion coming in 2 minutes. Jonathan, do you have your hand up?
I did, and then I put it down, but maybe I'll ask this anyway. It seems to me that there's kind of 4 categories of work in this field. There's people who are developing the actual solutions, like how do you sequester more carbon in each realm, whether it's forestry, ag, ranching, conservation, management of land. There's people developing the policy around that, which drives the availability of funding. There's folks, then who are tasked on the ground to implement new forestry practices or new soil management practices within a farm or whatever. There was another one, but it seems to have escaped my working memory. But so are all of these different kind of realms of, then the 4th one is the people who connect, newly developed policy and technical solutions to the decision makers and the implementers on the ground at a patch of forest or a farm, a ranch, a forestry company that might implement these ideas. So in these 4 realms of professions, are all 4 of those realms going to be tackled by this study?
Good question. I'm new to workforce, but I'd say that our focus, at least what we ask for in the scope of work, is very much the implementation. So very much what it takes to put some projects on the ground. Certainly, I think there's space. I think when it comes to the natural climate solutions workforce, there's a lot more that needs to be captured in the workforce that supports implementation, meaning like when you're looking at how, and maybe I'll ask Andrew to speak to this too, when you're looking at the classification schemes that already exist, sometimes when you're doing like policy work, you're in a completely different like bucket of classification scheme. So I don't know, I would ask this team to kind of explain how those might live in an occupations like list.
Yeah, and I think, again, the goal is to have a list of occupations, describe them in a way that makes sense to the field. And so, I think specific to the question of policy, we're doing a project right now for Denver on natural resource management. And one of the issues we run into there is that a lot of the local government employees and occupations working in the sector are just collapsed under a sort of public sector in industry code. And so we need to do some extra work to figure out how to pull those out and fit them into the schema. And I think that's true for all of these ambiguities. There are no bright lines. And again, it's part of that definitional phase where we need to understand, have a consistent agreed upon definition of the sectors we're looking at and the occupations within those sectors and how they overlap and exist in the data. And if they don't, how we collect information if we can on to fill in the gaps.
We have a big job ahead of us. Say that. And so there'll be some fuzziness, some fogginess together here while we're meeting. And then hopefully we'll be able to come back and the project team will have done some work and maybe, slowly start shedding some light and helping with categorizations and definitions. To that end, Any more? I don't see any more hands at this point.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hey.
Dean, you did it. Dean, your question.
You know, so my computer just always wants to use a microphone that I don't have for some reason. Then I have to tell it to use the right one. So I typed my question in the chat, but and maybe actually more of a comment, worded more as a comment than a question, but it builds on something that Mike talked about, sort of along the lines of, you know, build it and then they will come, you know, get companies started doing the work and then they will recruit people and train them. I think that's really valid. And then also what Kathy said about the forestry major who didn't know about some important jobs in the forestry industry. And also Jonathan's more recent comment about the 4 different levels. I think there's a real opportunity to help people work at and learn from those different levels so that in the chat, I gave an example of a company that does restoration work in Western Oregon, and they hire people, a lot of times they hire people with college degrees, and those folks work for this company for like 2-3 years, and then they get hired by other organizations like our conservation district to do what Jason called, or Jonathan would have called, you know, kind of higher level management or policy work. And the great thing about that is not just, you know, those higher level jobs probably pay more and have more benefits. It's better for those human beings, but they're bringing this real on the ground knowledge into those higher level jobs that really help make them be more effective at those mid or higher level jobs. So again, that's more of a comment than a question. I'm just wondering what your take on that is.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in there. That's a great comment, and we've seen or tried to understand exactly that dynamic play out in our recent studies, and it's very important. Both the forestry sector and the housing construction industry, and some of what we heard from employers there was that because the trend is towards, you know, sort of hiring your management directly out of college, an MBA or something like that, and they have no experience. They don't know what it's like to work in the woods. They don't understand the challenges and so on. They don't know what it's like to be on a construction site, and that's obviously not helpful. It's important to understand sort of the vertical structure of your industry from the bottom to the top. And I think yes, definitely want to keep that in mind. I think it's important for building pathways for those lower level workers. It's also important for having management that understands the operations in a very deep sense.
And I think that's a really helpful lens by which we could maybe, to the extent we can, narrow our, or kind of help parse out our occupational profiles, or the occupations that we'll focus on. And I know it's a personal passion of mine, and I know shared by others on our project team. We're really interested in those occupations that offer those opportunities for advancement. From a technical know-how skills standpoint, but also from a pay and benefit standpoint as well. I think that's really, really important. And we know that some of these those jobs, perhaps those definitely exist in these NCS sectors, and there may be other occupations that maybe with a little bit of help and additional investment can become those family supporting jobs, or those good jobs that could help sustain individuals in their communities.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, I think from the training pathways perspective, are there opportunities to help build pathways for, you know, maybe large, relatively low paid occupations that do not have clear pathways, whether it's by supporting private sector investments and development, or maybe it's public sector.
Sure.
It might be interesting to include a couple of case statements or some key case studies showing kind of that here's a progression you can take in your career.
Sure.
That would be an interesting thing to both analyze, but also just be able to present as a way to help folks think about how to engage in this.
That's a really interesting suggestion. And that reminds me, certainly something we can take on. And that reminds me of something that we encountered. Andrew, I'm sure you also have examples of this just in prior workforce experience. You know, just thinking about some of the American recovery and reinvestment efforts in the late in the late 2000, in the late aughts, there was a lot of money being placed into residential energy efficiency work. So solar panel installation, weatherization, all necessary work, not very well paid. So some of our early engagements in that sector were really trying to crack that nut of how do we get residential energy efficiency installers into some of that higher paid work, either through a utility, doing that similar work, but at a much larger scale for universities, hospitals, for institutional organizations where they could access additional skills and pay, which is important.
The other interesting kind of maybe case study to look at, I remember when renewable energy, specifically wind power, was really ramping up a decade or more ago. In early days, the community colleges got very involved in developing new training systems or training programs for folks in that industry. And I wonder if there's some lessons to be learned from that we could carry over into some of the fields that we're talking about.
That's great. Thank you.
I think Jocelyn wrote an interesting observation in the chat that some of the jobs are outdoors and hard labor, and people cannot do that physically for their entire careers. Like, they need to be able to have an option to move out or move on to something.
Yeah, it's not just a low pay issue. They just won't, having done habitat restoration through summers, it's tough, and you need to mix it up at minimum, and it can be physically taxing.
Having also done restoration, I concur. This is good discussion. I think actually getting to some of the questions you guys have lined up for discussion. So I'll kind of just leave it to you on how you want to ask and move into that, or which questions you might want to highlight or move into at this point.
Sure. We did have a few questions, and thank you all so much for your feedback. I think this is all really helpful input and just adds color and considerations to our project as we go into it. You all have already started addressing or touching upon some of the questions that we're going to ask you right now. So, they may feel a little asked and answered, but we're going to go through them, and you all would love to hear a little bit more from you all. And certainly this won't be the first time that we chat. So think of this as the first of many conversations around these topics. So we have 3 questions in total, 4 questions actually. And the first one is really thinking about these natural climate solutions sectors. We've been talking about forests, floodplains, rangelands, et cetera, et cetera. What specific employment opportunities or needs do you see in the NCS sector or sectors that you work in? And by that, I mean, are you seeing, from your vantage point, are you seeing any big projects coming online, or any large needs in your area? Or are you seeing any projected increase or decrease in public investment that we should be aware of as we go into this process? And we could take down the slide so everybody could see each other for this part.
Plant materials are kind of the basis for a lot of what we need to do across sectors.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Sorry, Catherine.
Plant materials are kind of that affects cover crops, forests, natural lands, restoration. Plant materials is kind of a big thing.
Seed supply, nurseries, right?
I think for us, it's data analysts and then geologists. We see a big need for geologists.
Betsy, can you talk about that a little more?
The thing I've seen most recently is conversations around pore space and analyzing geologic formations that would be good for core space carbon storage. And we need geologists who would be able to have conversations about that.
So more technological carbon storage?
Yep.
Is that
Yep.
interesting?
And then just more of the data analysts that can work with information that we're getting out of our forests every day.
Ben, would you like to speak to your chat?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's just, I think we've seen, particularly with the demand on federal land for thinning operators, a real gap of operators interested in thinning or kind of other non-overstory removal type practices across private lands. And also we've seen the rates go very high because of the federal government's willingness to pay very high rates. And so the demand is up, but the supply is low for that type of operator. And there's both a training element there, but also the investment capital needed for the equipment is pretty significant. So it's kind of a parallel challenge, or if you want to have small operators, you also need financing that they can access.
I had a bit of a related thought, which is kind of other factors. So financing is certainly one of those. You know, some work that the Nature Conservancy did in California really talked about the issue of housing, especially in, you know, affordability of housing and housing availability in rural areas. And I don't know that it's appropriate in this study to go in depth on that, but I think it would be good to highlight some of those other issues that need to be addressed as we think about workforce.
There are some good ideas coming through chat. Jocelyn and Andrea are speaking from the ag point of view. Do one of you want to speak?
Well, I just put more of the public farm advisors, OSU Extension, USDA. I put RCDs, but the resource conservation districts, but it's soil water conservation districts in Oregon. And then, yeah, Andrea's correct, agronomists, soil scientists.
Yeah. And then along with that, we're going to need more of the ancillary, like the lab folks, because as we move farther down on this and we do soil carbon testing, we're going to need folks who know how to do the testing. You know, the problem is a lot of the universities have gone away from soil science itself as a degree and have gone to plant science. And really, we need the focus back on soil as well.
Thank you.
You know,
do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, it strikes me that many of the comments that folks are making could have to do with recruiting new people into those kinds of work. But it also, there's a need for training people who are in those jobs to take on new practices that have to do with natural climate solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, new practices, kind of coming back to Ben's comment of like, well, you know, hiring the right kind of operator that understands the practice that you'd like to implement.
You bet. And having agronomists who can help people put on the right amount of nitrogen so you don't have denitrification, you know, and instead of trying to sell more product. That
good example. Jazz is speaking from a wetlands point of view. Jazz, did you want to talk about your chat?
Yeah, as Liz mentioned, I kind of live in the wetland space where it feels like a lot of data is still, you know, nascent for a greenhouse gas monitoring. I think we have a good hold on carbon perhaps, but there are other greenhouse gases like methane, you know, nitrous oxide being emitted from these wetlands. And so in terms of monitoring, which will be needed to kind of accomplish our NCS goals, I think, you know, driving more people, more folks towards those fields as well. And I also included on their mapping and GIS experts, you know, also important for a lot of the wetland mapping work.
it's like a whole different, it's almost a different lens, getting back to what Jonathan was saying about like the carbon sequestration aspect, and that's also the people implementing, like if you're implementing wetland restoration, right? Like you could easily do those things without each other, but doing them together and or being knowledgeable about them.
I'm seeing a few hands up here. Megan and Mike.
Thank you.
Seconding the comments about both need for training for folks to move into positions where they might be, for example, in a farm service provider role, but also maybe more importantly, training the existing farm service providers on skills, both technical and maybe policy related skills that they might need for providing support with natural climate solutions to producers.
More hands.
I see Mike. Hi, Mike.
Yeah, I may amend my comments from earlier a little bit, but speaking from the agricultural area, having been in agriculture, I wrote the other day that scared me to death, but I've been in agriculture for 60 years. You know, agriculture in Oregon is really struggling, and my opportunity, I hope for the opportunity that we will be able to put some funds into farms around Oregon through climate work. And it depends on what the work looks like in the end, but it may end up being the same sort of thing we deal with in labor intensive agriculture now. Is it's very difficult to get workers to do everyday labor. And if that's what the kind of work is going to look like, say, for example, planting 1 million acres of Oregon to more trees or something along that line, and it's not mechanized, it will depend, like most agricultural work, on an immigrant workforce. And I think that's something we have to take into consideration. You know, I've worked with Hispanic workers now for 44 years. They're the people that do the work on the ground, and there's no other way to look at it. You know, we can have people do a few summer projects, but in the end, if it's actually physical labor on the ground, it's going to be an immigrant workforce. And they're the ones that are important, and they're the ones that feed America. And I actually was in DC a couple of weeks ago talking about it, but that's where I see the biggest shortage. I think if there's money, we have plenty of technical expertise coming out of the universities. It's there. We just have to have the money to put them to work. So I don't see that as a limiting factor. I see, like Ben mentioned in the forestry sector, there's maybe not enough capacity there to do forestry work that may be funded. But that's a little different work. A lot of that's mechanized work, although there is some handwork. But simply going forward, on the ground work may have to be done with immigrant labor, like a lot of our other farm work. Thanks.
Mike, I think you raise a really important point, and I think our report, you know, somehow we need to characterize the importance of that. There was a great OPB Think Out Loud session on this sometime this week. But, you know, that whole bigger workforce need is a critical discussion for us to think about and how to engage in.
Great. Nikita?
Thank you. Mike, I first have to just say, I hope to get some coffee with you one day, because we could have a long discussion about all of that. In relationship to agriculture and low barrier entry points for people that don't necessarily have the resources to be able to go to college to find pathways to a degree, to find those pathways to access for, you know, a full-on business plan that leads to opportunities for loans to even get into agriculture. There's just so many layers of barriers when it comes to access into agriculture that I've been speaking with a lot of different people in nonprofits and organizations, universities, about perhaps starting an alternative to our normal programming that we have currently in the state, where we can start a statewide incubator project. And I just had the pleasure of sitting with the Secretary of President to Western Oregon University, where they have a surplus of land right now. I just last week spoke on a panel at Chemeketa Community College talking about and highlighting the specifics around being Black while farming, which really highlighted being BIPOC, land access and acquisition here in the Valley and what that looks like. And the conversations has really led to Western Oregon University to perhaps utilize the surplus of land that they have, but also with the implementation of talking about economic development and opportunities for people to get into agriculture that aren't necessarily there right now. So I feel like with this opportunity, maybe perhaps a university could be brought into the conversation and considered that is looking to provide equitable access to marginalized community members that don't necessarily get to have the access to enter into this room and this conversation, perhaps.
Thank you for that.
Mike and Nikita, I very much appreciate your comments. I think that's certainly something that certainly me and some of the rest of the project team is holding. And to your point, Nikita, about speaking to educational institutions will be a bucket of organizations that we want to reach out to with our stakeholder lists. And I'm also particularly curious at seeing how the community college system does and can continue to play a role in supporting these sectors. So that's lots of food for thought there.
Just want to bring attention to Ben's chat for the project team. Maybe the study might need to consider like mechanization versus manual treatments, or who does what kind, who are the people who do manual versus mechanized. So that might be an interesting way to parse things out.
Yeah. Okay. Liz, I know we have about 7 minutes left, and we technically have 4 questions. So I'm trying to, we had two questions around NCS occupations that currently offer opportunities for career advancement and good wages. But I'd actually like to ask the inverse question that we had. What are some of the barriers? And I think we've talked a little bit about some barriers, but maybe we can dig in a little further with the very little time we have left. If you don't mind pulling up the slides, it's slide 15, question 3. And I know folks have talked a little bit about, some of the barriers that exist in terms of accessing workers, regardless of skill. But I'm curious to hear from you all, just given the variety of landscapes that exist throughout Oregon. It's a big state. What are some of the barriers that you all see in terms of access, retention, advancement in your experience? And I see Andrea's hand up.
Yeah, the funding structure of how we fund these jobs does not provide necessarily for living wages for even highly skilled, highly educated folks. So, and they're often located in areas where, although maybe the middle of nowhere, it's actually a high cost area to live, right? So it's treated as if it's a low cost area, but it's not. It's actually expensive to live there, just because bringing in everything you need. So it really is very much a people being able to have a decent future while doing this work.
Thank you. Any others? Oh, hello, Mike. I see your hand up. Oh, you might be muted, Mike.
Yep, sorry.
There you go.
It all comes down to money, I think, in the end. And can we put enough money into the system to be able to create these opportunities? Working with farm workers for years, we pay them as much as we can, but unfortunately, there's not enough money in the food system to pay anymore. I mean, I personally haven't been paid in 6 years. So it really comes down to money, how we're going to get enough money into the system to be able to create these opportunities. It's not going to come from, unfortunately, from the landowners. In most cases, it's not there in Oregon.
Thanks, Mike. Okay.
I think one of the other issues is because of the lack of expectation that there are jobs. People are leaving rural communities in Oregon and moving to urban communities. And I think some of the barrier we need to address is really focused in on that rural community and what the opportunities are. And to Mike's point, kind of the support that's available in rural communities to families to be able to sustain their livelihoods.
Thanks, Catherine.
Okay, being respectful of time, I think we need to close it there for now. If you want to take the slides down, Jen.
Actually, I'm sorry. There's one more thing, or maybe we could do it in the chat. We did have a survey, which we don't have to respond to within this meeting. It's sort of this is the survey where we wanted to ask you all, based on our conversation today, who we should be talking to. So Ellen, if you can please put that link in the chat, you'll see it there. You could click on it and it'll ask you a few questions around folks, individuals or organizations that we should talk to. Thank you so much for the feedback that you all have provided from the last meeting and currently. That is helping to build our list. We hope that this will as well. Please take a look and either respond shortly after this meeting. We'll keep it open for a couple of days and build that list. So thank you.
If you could send the questions you're asking, I think that would be super helpful to help us populate that.
Great. Yes, I can do that. We're currently working on them with several tasks happening at once, but we will definitely do that as soon as we can.
And Megan, yes, we'll send the survey out afterwards. Like I'll do a follow-up email with Cynthia. Yes.
And we can
set out even send the types of questions, right? It doesn't have to be the specific questions.
Yeah, great point, Andrea.
Definitely. And we could extend the timeline to offer a little bit more flexibility there. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's why I wanted to stop the conversation a little bit. I knew you had the survey information to and directions to give. And we'll do a little bit of coordination amongst ourselves so that the follow-up notes to this meeting make sense and give clear directions. So everyone, thank you for your time today. It's a really robust conversation. Cynthia, would you like to wrap up any final thoughts, and Kathy afterwards?
Sure.
Nothing else for me. Just thank you so much for your time and expertise. I've personally learned so much just from hearing you all over the last 90 minutes. And this will be the first of many touch points. So looking forward to learning more and sharing with you all about our findings. So thanks on behalf of the entire team.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add that, I'm super excited about the work we're able to do with funding from HB 3409 on natural and working lands. And this workforce study is a great, it's great that that's we've got that ready for implementation. We've got the inventory and we've got activity measures. And I think there'll be really rich conversations that we can have about all of the above. So I'm super excited about the work that this group can help advise to the Oregon Climate Action Commission. And again, want to thank all of you for your time. But there's a lot of important and great work ahead of us, and you're going to really help us refine that and advance it.
Great. Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.